I come from the faraway magical land of Rajasthan, India. My work, in essence, is about strengthening people's knowledge systems and cultural imaginations, and regenerating diverse learning ecosystems that are necessary to move beyond a monoculture agenda for the world. I work to inspire young people from all over India to understand that they are not dropouts or failures, but rather walkouts. They have left the rat race dream of so-called mainstream global economy and are now ready to walk on to new possibilities based on localization. Let me start by putting my cards on the table. The agenda of my speech is to raise the bar of courage, dialogue, and imagination required to think beyond the global monopoly of schooling, which I believe needs to be exposed for what it really is, McEducation for all. Under McEducation, learning and knowledge, along with everything else in life, is to be extracted from an abundant gift of the commons and converted into a ready-made, scarce commodity that can be processed, packaged, and cleverly sold back to us. We are made to believe that McEducation, like McDonald's, is a key step in the journey to being a developed, peaceful, and democratic civilization. To start my presentation, I would like to teleport you to India, to a place called Kalinganagar in the state of Orissa. This is a future site of the Tata Steel 6 million ton per year integrated steel plant, which will cover 3,500 acres of land. Orissa is rich in mineral resources like iron ore, bauxite, coal, and it also happens to be the home to many indigenous tribal communities. There are more than 84 million diverse tribal peoples living in India today, which is almost 4 times the population of Australia. They and all their sacred lands are under siege. The Tatas run more than 100 companies in 80 countries around the world. They are big, big players. They own mines, gas fields, steel plants, telephone, cable, TV, and broadband networks, and run whole townships. They manufacture cars, trucks, tea, books. They run a bookstore chain, iodized salt, and even cosmetics. The following video, which I want to show you, was produced 7 years ago as part of a serious PR campaign developed as a corporate social responsibility project of Tata Steel to try to quell people's nonviolent resistance against the upcoming steel plant. I will try, as we play the video, to give you my best kung fu dubbing along with without the sound. So, shall we start? So the title is Darkness or the Light. Slightly more volume. If I stay here in the village, nothing can happen. There is no work for me here. If the factory gets built, many new avenues for development will emerge. If you look,
तो कितने लोगों को रोजी रोटी मिल रही
है।
लेकिन दादा, हमें तो अपने बाप दादा के घर जमीन से बेदखल होना पड़ेगा।
But elder brother, this means we will have to abandon our ancestral lands.
विकास के रास्ते तो बंद नहीं किए जा सकते।
Displacement is a real problem.
दुनिया आगे बढ़ रही है।
But just because of that, we cannot stop the new paths of development. The world is moving forward. We cannot live separately from the rest of the world. And who doesn't like progressing? But if we have to trust somebody, who should we trust? Those people who are partners in our development. Tata Steel, partners in development. This was a corporate social responsibility project. Let me tell you a little bit more about the story of Biju, the young man in the video. It is a story that is common all over India. As a child, Biju was taken by some missionaries to a private convent boarding school as a promising first-generation learner. There he studied about the great green revolution in farming, about how the big dams are the temples of modern India, about the wonders of economic privatization, about the fundamentalists and terror of Pakistan, and of course, about the great IT revolution. He takes great pride in hearing that India is on the verge of being a superpower and that he must sacrifice for the good of the nation. He is also consistently reminded that he is lucky to escape the fate of his primitive tribal ancestors. He is punished for speaking his local language in the school. Biju is forced to study all the time and is unable to spend time with his family or at village functions. And Biju forces his father to sell their animals and land and take on more debt to support his growing peer pressure-induced global branded lifestyle: Nokia cell phones, Honda motorcycle, Nike t-shirts, McDonald's food. He learns that he is poor and the best things in life cost a lot of money. Like millions of youth around the country, Biju fails the class 12 exam 2 times. In a great crime against humanity, he is now rebranded as a failure. Unable to cope with the costly life in the city, Biju is forced to come back to his village, but there he is also a misfit. He no longer has any connection to the animals, to the river, to the forest, to the sacred mountains, to the local culture. He is filled with a lethal combination of superiority and shame towards his village. He can be found spending most of his days in a routine of playing cricket with his friends in the morning, gambling with cards and alcohol in the afternoon, and lying around drunk in front of the TV in the evenings. He has been known to have several altercations in the village. Needless to say, he's a very frustrated young man. But Biju hears about the proposed steel plant and the proposed compensation for the village's common lands. Filled with Bollywood dreams, he believes that selling the lands, buying a new fancy car, and getting a job at the new factory will be the ticket to success that he has been looking for. He starts working with the land mafia and with some local gundas to help convince a few remaining villagers about the virtues of selling their land and ending the resistance. Through a threefold strategy of educating the youth off of the land and silencing the wisdom holders of the village as backward, ignorant terrorists and not open to change, through corruption and buying out state and media officials, and when all else fails, through severe fear and intimidation, intimidation of the villagers from local goons and police, the villagers are ultimately forced to finally agree to the project. I bring you now to 2013, where Biju's village has been razed to the ground. More than 1,200 families from Biju's village have been displaced from their lands. Some have been resettled in a concrete rehabilitation colony. Biju has been given a low-level job in the security wing of the Tata Steel plant. More than 200 children from his community have been sent away from their families and enrolled in residential boarding schools. We are told in the Economic Times that there's something to cheer about for the families displaced by the Tata Steel project. With Tata's help, these families have achieved the elusive Millennium Development Goals in their rehabilitation camp. Nationwide, Tata is praised for bringing the light of more than 200 education institutions to the darkness of Orissa. The tribals of Orissa are being empowered. Biju's story was about the losers. Let me tell you another story about the winners of the Education for All game. It's a story about liberation that ranks up there with the US soldiers freeing the women in Afghanistan. Let me now teleport you to urban India. Video? Oh, sorry, 1 second. I am sure you have all heard. Sorry. 1 second. Teleporter off, 1 second. I'm sure you have heard of the horrible face whitening creams for girls. Some of you may have even heard of Fair and Handsome, which was developed so that boys would no longer have to sneak into their bathroom and secretly use their sister's face whitening creams. But there's a new twist. Let's have a look now.
Ooh, I feel like a virgin. I feel like a virgin.
Oh yes, it's true.
Oh yes, it's true.
Oh yes, you do.
Oh yes, I do.
Feels like
The very first time. I feel like a virgin. I
Feel like a virgin. 18 again. Vaginal tightening and rejuvenating gel. Now in India. Log on to
www.18again.com.
So shockingly, I was shocked to find out there's a growth of both vaginal whitening and vaginal tightening products sweeping across the educated consumer middle class of India. The spokeswoman for the ad in an interview said that this is a breakthrough for women's choice and women's empowerment. Like the globalized and standardized perfect McDonald's hamburger, the same can now be done for women's vaginas all over the world. This, along with the tango, as we can see from the video, is the perfect solution to the loss of self-esteem, strained family relationships, and ecological devastation facing the planet. Now, what do these two stories have in common? Of course, they are both feel-good stories about the power of education for empowerment, mobility, choices, good citizenship, security, democracy, internet connectedness. They are also about what I call the crisis of the schooled. They're stories that educate us to believe that we are uncivilized, backwards, and living in the heart of darkness in all senses of the word. Stories that teach us that true salvation and our big purpose in life lies in selling yourself to the highest bidder and consuming brands in the global economy. I don't believe that a genuine localization movement can be built unless we radically rethink education as a system. We talk about saving our environment, saving our seeds, saving our communities, but we have outsourced from our lives our most precious gifts, our children. And at the same time, we have silenced, maimed, and exiled our grandparents and elders. It is important to note there are very few spaces left for intergenerational dialogue in industrial society. I have found that McEducation for All is an essential vehicle of social control, cultural genocide, and modern servitude to the suicidal global economy. It is a Trojan horse into the social movements all over the world. It is a politically correct way to domesticate and tame growing social unrest and people's power. We are made to believe that we are separated and competing against each other all the time. Also, we have lost faith in our capacities to learn without officially certified teachers. I am deeply appreciative of all the forms of resistance against the culture of schooling, direct and indirect, that teachers, parents, and students attempt every day. Arts education, service projects, school gardens, nature camps, mindfulness training, diversity workshops, visits to old age homes, even bringing babies into the classrooms. But I no longer have any hope that schooling as a system can be fixed. The solution is not simply more courses in localization or teacher training teachers better, or even better technology, even if it's called Khan Academy. It's not just about fitting into the existing operating system anymore. The time has come for us to understand the hidden curriculum, the relationship of structures and values. We need to explore how to stop feeding our children into a world of false exams, degrees, competition, compulsion, commodification, ready-made answers, and hyper-standardization. I think the real work before us today is actually all about unlearning. The power of the localization movement is that it's giving us the courage and tools to break the cage of McEducation and look for hope in new places. 1 minute. As an adult, I was able to live with and care for my grandparents for 9 years. In addition to being an intense student of Mahatma Gandhi, I like to say that I did my PhD at my illiterate grandmother's university. Since Gia, my grandmother, had shaken up my Harvard-educated, UN-civilized, investment banking, arrogant worldview many times. She had helped me to trigger my unlearning journey, step out of my colonized and conditioned mind to see what the game of education was really about, and to envision a whole different world of learning possibilities. I think Gandhi had learned about localization in a similar way, by listening to the grandmothers around the villages of India. The most profound lesson I learned from her was the difference between knowing and being. My grandmother and traditional communities all over the world already know about localization. They live it every day of their lives. I've been talking about sustainability for a long time, but my grandmother did not give any lectures on zero-waste lifestyles. She simply embodied it. I remember one time I had just eaten some mangoes and was about to throw out the peel and the seeds. She asked me to dry them in the sun. I was shocked when I saw her a few days later making a tasty vegetable dish out of them. She said the peels of any fruit or vegetable were the most nutritious parts of it, so she questioned why we throw them away. This was my first lesson in upcycling. Imagine how many more people we could feed on the planet if we remembered the art of cooking the peels of watermelons, zucchinis and squashes, peas, even aloe vera. Gia helped me to see many, many abundant possibilities that had been rendered invisible to me by McEducation. So in conclusion, we must see localization movement not as driven more and more by technocratic policies and technological inputs, but rather by the spirit of wisdom, compassion, innovativeness, collaboration, and practical know-how of our grandmothers. Thank you.